I'm going to talk today about how experiences as a child of medical interventions, really complex birth situations, and also children who have complex physical, mental, or learning needs or disabilities may also be children that we need to think about as having high levels of anxiety stored in their bodies. So I'm going to try and summarise the reading and studying that I've done in all of these books. I'm not medically trained, so please always consult doctors, and I'm not going to give any medical advice, of course not. But from work that I've done with parents and requests that I've had recently, I think it's really important that we have a broader awareness of how difficult experiences for a baby when they're born or post-birth can and will leave a stored memory. So not in a way that you might remember what you had for breakfast this morning, and as you're talking about it, you actually see the whole scene of what happened and what was in your bowl or on your plate. But things that happen to us before we are verbal, we store inside us via our sensory memory and our emotional memory. And when we smell or taste or touch or feel or see something that relates back to early experiences we had, it will trigger a response in our whole body system. So what do I mean? Let's think about medical interventions. So sometimes, we live in this incredible time of science. And as you know, I love science. So it means that now babies can be born, or even in the womb can have operations carried out. They can have medical interventions which are life preserving and life sustaining, which, yes, a fantastic thing. So what we need to focus on here is that if a baby or a young child has to have maybe cannulas put into their arms or other parts of their bodies, they may have to have surgery, injections, bloods taken, all sorts of things in this process. And of course, as the parents and carers around them, we're there for them with love and we're connecting with them, but we can't explain to them all the different feelings and shocks and pains and sensations that they're experiencing in their body. And it does leave an impression. And why is that useful to know? Well, when you've been through all this with your child, you experience trauma yourself from watching it and from being there, but also we can sit in that space of peace that we were able to access for our children. But it's a tough road. I have experienced it myself when my son, he wasn't a baby, he was older, but it's really hard to watch it all going on. So what can we do? Well, knowing that medical procedures are experiences when we're being born. So for example, if a baby gets stuck for too long in the birthing channel or has to in some way be pulled out or, rescued to save their lives and reduce their distress, again, there'll be a sensory and a kind of physical memory of what happened, not in the brain, so they can't think about it and recall it, luckily, in that way. But again, the smell of maybe a medical chemical or something that had to be used at the time, or the blood even, or whatever it was, it may later on be quite triggering for them. And of course, that sense of being trapped will have caused high levels of stress and anxiety. Couldn't be helped, of course, but it will leave its imprint. And then let's lastly think about children with a range of disabilities. I was deeply fortunate to work with a parent whose child has complex physical needs, mental needs, learning needs, and ongoing health needs that she was born with, and they live with every day. And one thing that had never been shared with her or had occurred to her, why would it, is that she also had a child with high anxiety because she'd gone through a very traumatic entry into the world and then loads and loads of procedures following her birth. Again, all for the child's good. But this had left the child, but also the parent, in this high state of anxiety so much of the time. And of course, medical trauma, birth trauma, disability trauma, these can all and will all come out in a range of different behaviours. So we might then have a child who's very resistant to certain things and will really go to war on having their socks put on. Or another day it might be something else, really simple that we don't understand. So complex behaviours that we find difficult and challenging, and often relate to touch and physical things that are going on for them, but also just anything that stresses them out: a sound, a taste, a touch, a smell, the sight of something, which they can't explain, but they can only show in their behaviour, which might be that they lash out at that point, or they shut down and they become completely immobile and unresponsive, so appear to be being difficult. Any really of the behaviours that most of us struggle with can come from these early experiences of being too stressed for too long, and then physical stuff that was being done to a baby or a child, which of course they can't escape from and we do need, but the lack of control, of being part of the process, does leave its mark. So just for you to think about this stuff, we can't help what's happened to our children, and we would obviously wish it gone in most cases, but understanding, that's why my child seems to get so overexcited, overwhelmed, lash out, scream so much, throw themselves on the floor a great deal. See that in the context of maybe that high level of stress and anxiety, and usually if that's happened during a birth or because of medical procedures, it doesn't just magically waft away afterwards, because we've witnessed that with our children, and then we can stay in this state of real distress, fear, and worry, and even trauma ourselves. So the more that we can do things that downregulate ourselves and keep us calm, then we can offer this calm presence to our children, and over time teach them really simple, tiny techniques which also bring them to a place of calmness and safety. More of that in my future videos, but I really hope that this has been helpful in some way to explain why you may have a very anxious child who had a difficult entry into this world, or had to go through some really complex or even not so complex but simple medical procedures that they found distressing at the time. And of course, thinking about children with additional needs, disabilities, as I say, there's often a strong link between that, if not always, and them having high levels of anxiety. So take care, and I'll post some more videos again soon. But meanwhile, do post comments down below or things that you might like me to cover, and I'll gladly get to them when I can.